Good day, everybody. Lovely to have you here in this virtual session for Infrastructure Africa. As we all know, infrastructure in Africa is absolutely crucial for Africa to play the meaningful and global role that it deserves and supposed to have all these centuries. So there's always something new coming out of Africa. We all accept that. And it's just amazing to be here virtually speaking. I mean, imagine that 100 years ago, we wouldn't even have thought of meeting like this. 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, not, but here we are. I've got a wonderful panel with us today to discuss something very, very close to my heart. And that is the developing the African small to medium and micro enterprises markets, creating jobs and growth on the African continent. And it's such an important subject for all of us. We need to be paying close attention to those entrepreneurs that are starting to come through on the African continent. All of us started out as SMEs, those of us that have got our own businesses. We didn't just walk in through the front door and start a large corporate. Everybody from Richard Branson to Bill Gates to everybody had to start at the bottom. Patrice Motsepe at the bottom, all of them, Dangote, all of them, they all had to start at the bottom. SMEs, each one's got their own story. And so today we've got a lovely panel here, a nice varied background. And yes, we do have someone with money. We do have someone who's got some nice technical experience on civil engineers, engineering and so on, a nice association. We've got someone that's really close to the training side of things. How do we upskill our SMEs? And then we've got an actual SME who's a success story. And I'm going to ask him a challenging question because his specific industry during COVID must have had a lot of disruption. So we'll be asking him about his experiences on that. So basically, just the summary around what we're going to be speaking on. As we look ahead, a healthy SME sector is vital. And I'll say that again, is vital for the economic recovery of African countries, where SMEs often make up more than 90% of all enterprises, and they contribute significantly towards inclusive economic growth. So sub-Saharan Africa alone has 44 million micro, small, and medium enterprises, and that number changes daily. It's up, it's down, it's up and down. They also, and this is key, they offer jobs in a real practical way and the promise of a livelihood, a real livelihood, a sustainable livelihood. As SMEs are responsible for approximately 80% of all jobs across the continent. So just take it into mind. These are very high figures. If we can ensure, and we as all of us as global partners and local partners can ensure that SMEs succeed, we will have a foundation for economic recovery that can fuel sustainable, inclusive growth in all corners of the continent. No one should be excluded just because of their geographic location, especially in this digital age. SMEs are playing an increasingly significant role in shaping national growth strategies. Politicians, decision makers, policy makers are realizing the importance of SMEs and are consequently altering and adjusting their growth agendas, their going forward agendas, their national strategic agendas to make sure that SMEs are supported. If you have a viable SME ecosystem, that directly implicates and impacts on your socioeconomics. If you have an unhappy population that has no future, guess what? They are going to storm your palace one day. So you've got to make sure your SMEs are happy. Make sure that they know that they can grow their businesses into substantial businesses one day. So that's very true across the whole continent. Also, SMEs contribute to improving the standard of living. Now, governments themselves, they struggle to get right down to the ground often and to ensure that standard of living is the same for everyone. Whether you live in Sandton or whether you live downtown in Alexandria, everybody should have the same standard of living or the opportunity to get to that higher standard of living, regardless of your background. And so SMEs play a crucial role in ensuring that that happens. They also support the more vulnerable segments of society as well. Women and youth, disabled, everybody has a chance to own a business, start a business as an SME. So a stable, growing, connected small business can be the key to financial inclusion of the whole community. what I take as my model, and it's something that was brought up a couple of weeks back. We were talking to one of these SMEs, one of our success stories, and he pointed out that all the SMEs, a lot of the SMEs in South Africa are first generation business owners. That means that they have no mentors, they have no guides, they have no generational capital to pull in. They've got no grannies and grandpas that they hope that they included in their will. That's not the reality for many SMEs. So they are starting on the back foot, but they are also can become these hidden leopards in the tree, ambushing the traditional structures. Why do I say that? Because these SMEs, if we help them and we showcase models from across the globe, your German Mittelstand, your Singaporean SME ecosystem, these ecosystems that support SMEs that are well established, they second, third, fourth generation. Our SMEs are first generation. If we plug them into fourth generational thinking, that means that they will be at the same as those fourth generational SMEs in Germany. Guess what? When we help them to get to fifth generation, they are leapfrogging those German SMEs that are still in third and second generation. So there's a great opportunity for our SMEs to be leapfrogging the rest of the world. So that's my vision. Who am I? My name is Mark Taylor. I've been kindly asked to help with this panel and introduce the panelists in that. Brief background. I've got a varied background. I've been in corporate, I've been in government, in the military, very regimented thinking. I've left to start my own businesses. Most of them failed, so I'm not a real great success story. I love risk. I love challenging myself, going into all sorts of directions. I love challenging the status quo. I don't think normally, so it's a bit of a problem for people that when I go ask them for money, they're like, look at me, no, Mark, go away. I'm not scared to ask you for $1 billion. I've done that twice now already, and the banking guys look at me like, oh, okay, all right, let's talk. But I understand the issues on the ground. Currently, I'm the National Operations Manager for a nonprofit. We're working with a whole lot of SMEs, helping them to grow their businesses. We're working with mining houses. We're working with national government, provincial government, metros, and municipalities. So we've got a really enviable board consisting of some nice big mining houses, government, and so on. So we understand the language that government speaks. We understand the language that corporates speak. And we understand the language and the aspirations and the visions and the expectations of SMEs. And unfortunately, there are huge gaps. So these gaps we want to address. So hopefully we can talk to some of these gaps today with our wonderful panelists. So I'll start first with Mr. Ken Osai. He's the money man. So as I always say to my SMEs, guys, follow the money. Understand the language of the bankers. So Ken, if you can just give a bit of a background about yourself, that would be great. Thank you. It's all over to you, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for the rest of the panelists. Really appreciate the opportunity to join you. So I'm at the International Finance Corporation, the private sector arm of the World Bank, principal investment officer based in Johannesburg, looking at new business for manufacturing and consumer services in effectively the SADC countries. I also wear another hat as health and education sector lead for Africa, so coordinating our business development across the continent. Now, the IFC, what do we do? We're a private sector arm of the World Bank. We provide financing across the spectrum, equity, debt, quasi-equity instruments. We finance sectors such as telecoms, infrastructure. The sector that I cover is manufacturing and consumer services, which is tourism, retail, property, health, and education. And then we also cover financial institutions, so banks and non-bank financials. I've been at the IFC now 10 years, started off as an equity specialist based in Nairobi, and now looking at a bigger portfolio of diverse businesses. The IFC is really keen to support enterprise. We are not always able to do it directly because there'll be thousands of enterprises that we would have to interface with. But looking forward to the discussion, Mark and colleagues, as to some of the different ways that we are able to do it, and some ideas around how one can explore this. As Mark said in the intro, SMMEs are really vital. I mean, we don't think about it these days, but all of our Uber and Bolt drivers are SMMEs. You know, they're part of an ecosystem. They're also a great example of using technology to enable SMMEs. So that's another very good example. During lockdown, I mean, as much as a lot of businesses were affected, it was the Uber Eats and the Mr. Deliveries that kept food moving. So I think the SMME component of an economy really should not be minimized across the spectrum. But I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you very much for that. And then Mo, give us a bit of background about yourself, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Mo Manda. Currently the Senior Manager for Strategic Planning at the Manufacturing, Engineering and Related Services sector in Education and Training Authority, where we basically assist, the 6 subsectors of the manufacturing sector with their training as well as education needs. And the SMME sector is one of the key sectors that we have identified as key in terms of our strategy, particularly because as part of national priorities as well. It has been identified, in terms of quite key in stimulating growth, as well as job opportunities, and also looking at, some of the challenges that we have in South Africa as part of, contributing to the social economy, because I think the SMME plays quite a big role in terms of contributing to the social economy in South Africa and in Africa in general. I also more in the academic space as well. I also serve in the Internet Society South Africa board. Also affiliated to quite a number of organizations internationally, such as the United Nations Policy Research Unit, which is basically an entity that looks at strengthening issues of electronic governance, digital transformation of governments. And my interest has really been around issues of policy. How can we strengthen our policy, particularly in Africa, especially in response to some of the challenges as well as to some of the opportunities that have been brought by the 4th Industrial Revolution. Now there's talks about the 5th Industrial Revolution. And I think SMMEs, more often than not, are always left out because they don't have the money. They often don't have the capability, the skills, to compete with the bigger players that have already set the tone, especially when looking at the 4th Industrial Revolution, as well as some of the disruptions that have been happening. So I think my interest is really around those areas, policy, as well as bridging really the gap between policy, the business side of things, as well as society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I've got some nice questions for you there, Mo. And then Sheldon, you're our entrepreneur. So give us some background. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So my name is Sheldon. I'm the founder of Legends Barber. So Legends was started by myself about 11 years ago on the stoep in Eldorado Park, and basically just being able to start out as a barber. I think that was one of the things that just shook everyone, because who makes a career out of cutting hair? So I started out basically moved into a lease premises, and from there being able to build a business until I failed the next year. I closed shop and eventually relaunched in 2014. Being able to build around 65 stores across the country. These stores are located in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho. So yeah, and we are looking to move more up in Africa. Also creating just over 514 jobs to date. And these jobs are across the whole of Legends Barbershop brand, where it's from the training and development up to the stores, and also having office personnel as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Yeah, I get goosebumps. I'm thinking, like, the jobs that you created, and I'm just thinking of your supply chains and value chains, and that's something I'd like to also address with you and with the panelists to talk around that, the role of SMEs in the supply chain. So yeah, excellent, great story. And I'm glad you failed. Yeah, this is like an entrepreneur has to fail. It's,
I think
yeah,
it's a
part
must.
of growing a
It's a
thick
must
skin.
to fail forward. Yes.
Chris, now, Chris, I didn't get a chance to confirm. You're with the Consulting Engineers of South Africa Association. Is that correct? The CESA. I'm hoping.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
Consulting Engineer South Africa. That's correct.
Yes, yes, yes. So CESA, for those of you that don't know, has a great website. So if you, as a sales guy, if you're ever looking for a list of companies and excellent links to those companies and names and contacts and that, do yourself a favor if you're in the technical field in any way, supplying any sort of service to engineering disciplines across a multitude of industries, you go to CESA website. They've got an excellent, excellent interactive website. And I just want to thank you, Chris. I used your website a hell of a lot when I was trying to sell engineering software to engineers. And what I know about engineering and what I know about software is dangerous. So that explains my sales record with that specific company. But anyway, Chris, give us a bit of background about yourself, please.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Campbell, Christopher for short, and I'm a civil engineer by profession. I spent quite a bit of time in the civil engineering field, in consulting engineering, for a period in an SOE in the railway environment, Transnet Freight Rail. So anybody want to know how to manage and maintain your infrastructure? I've done that. And I've also spent time in the manufacturing industry, manufacturing precast concrete products that go into construction, such as railway sleepers, pipes, etc. And that was not only limited to South Africa. Done it as far afield as Zambia, Mozambique, Swaziland, and even Dar, considering that I'm in Joburg. So, essentially, my background is, as you can see, rather mixed. I'm not of necessity stuck to any one area. And I think for my sins, I also had a parallel career in institutional work. And I find myself now in an entity such as Consulting Engineer South Africa, where we spend our time, and essentially I see it as solving engineering problems of a different nature. And the nature of that is trying to support and assist our public and private sector entities in their infrastructure development efforts through our member companies. We have a plethora of member companies with expertise to offer. And, often we do find that our role is not only that of advocacy on that front, but also advisory, where the expertise may be lacking within a specific entity, public or private. They could always call on us for advice on how to approach it, and we will provide them with an objective response. So we don't biasedly represent the views only of companies that are members of ours. We provide objective advice so that you have a win-win situation. And in addition to that, much to, I think, some of our other colleagues talk about is we do a lot of training. We do training not only for people in our sector through member companies, but also through their clients, through the client bodies in public sector, where often there's a shortage of specific knowledge around areas that relate to infrastructure delivery. So, my interest in this, if we talk about South Africa as a microcosm of the continent, it would be, how do we get our country to be and become more functional than what it is currently and where it should be? And if infrastructure is going to be the catalyst for that, how can we help? And likewise, if we take it broader across the continent, the same challenges exist. Economic recovery across the continent is dependent on infrastructure delivery. We've got the capacity, we've got the human capital, we have the people. It's really just a case of bring on the work and let's help grow the expertise of each of us. So I'll pause there, otherwise I run the risk of rambling on again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, we welcome rambling because there's so many points that you brought up there, Chris, that that are, you know, these are the things that we need to talk to seriously. And there's some points that you raised. We have the people. There's no doubts about that. I see that every day, the amazing talent that's locked up inside our townships. And one of the areas that we work in as Leparo is a small little township called Manziville. Now that's there by Mohali City, the old Krugersdorp. Now, Manziville is a very volatile area. If I speak to people from there, I say, look, we've got an office in Manziville. The people are like, oh, what are you doing in there? It's like a really dangerous place. The third day that I was on the job, we were held hostage. Just to give you an idea, the community was not happy. We had an open day. And we've actually turned that whole situation around just by engaging with the communities, showing them that we are working closely with them, providing jobs for them, and so on and so forth. But the talent that has come out of Manziville is incredible. And I'm just so amazed at all the talent that's locked up. So that's something that you've brought up, which is very key for us, Chris. And that's something that we need to talk to. Skills development, training, and that yourself and more, you both on that side. More, what do you see, or what do you think is one of the key industries that we need to be focusing on that's realistic for us to achieve quick turnaround in South Africa? And then a little bit bigger into SADC itself, because I've heard one of the ministers say from Namibia, if we can't get even trade between South Africa and Namibia going properly, how can we expect to do African continental free trade trade? So more, tell us a bit about what do you think are key industries that we need to get training in, that people are not, that there's gaps, that we bringing in people from overseas that could be covered by locals. So what do you think?
No, thank you so much for that question. And obviously, coming from the manufacturing and engineering sector, I will be biased to say, manufacturing. If you look at the history of South Africa, South Africa and the manufacturing sector's contribution to the GDP, and even in Africa in general, it has actually declined from about 20% to about 12%, And if you look at countries in the BRICS, I'll give the BRICS, I'll give the BRICS as an example. They've been driven by manufacturing. If you look at China, for example, they are made in China 2025 strategy. Similarly with India, they've been driven by manufacturing. And this is one thing that I believe as Africa we need to focus on. Manufacturing is quite a broad field. There's manufacturing in terms of whether it's automotive manufacturing, whether it's chemicals, whether it's food and beverages. There's quite a lot of opportunities there. Even in textiles, if you look at South Africa, for example, the textile sector, we used to have a viable textile sector in South Africa, even in Africa in general. But over the years, those are some of the sectors that we have seen quite a decline. And looking from the examples from the Far East, like I said, from the likes of China, even from the likes of South Korea, those economies have grown because of the growth, of their manufacturing sector. And even if I look at in South Africa, most of our policies, they say the right things in terms of the need to stimulate growth in the manufacturing sector as part of the localization drive. Because when we talk about localization, how do we begin to drive, manufacturing as well as the producing of goods and services in South Africa and in the African context? Because in response, to some of the policies, be it in South Africa, as well as, the Agenda, 2063, strategy that is really looking at how do we begin, to work together as Africa in terms of stimulating growth and development in the African continent. I think that is one of the key sectors. And my belief is that if we can go grow sectors such as the manufacturing sector, it will have a ripple effect, even in terms of creating jobs, as well as other entrepreneurial opportunities, for example. I'll give, for example, Sheldon is here. I'll bet you that even in the industry that is in, there's quite a lot of products that they are using, but are not manufactured here in South Africa. So once we grow that sector, it has a ripple effect. We always talk about beneficiation in terms of the mining sector. Extraction of raw minerals, from the ground, they are all exported to countries outside of South Africa and in Africa. How do we begin to build capability in terms of ensuring that we have that manufacturing capability? And when we talk about manufacturing capability, it's not just the big players. It's also the SMEs who are quite key in terms of that local, manufacturing value chain, as well as the global manufacturing value chain. So I think building that capability for me is quite key. And the reason why I chose the manufacturing sector is because of the ripple effect that it has in terms of stimulating growth in other sectors as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. That leads me to the question I want to ask you, Ken. So be prepared. Ken, what are the problems? Why are we not achieving these kind of manufacturing goals? We all talk it. The policies are there. The money is there. Everything is there. The market is there. The demand is there. What is the real reason, in your opinion, why we are not achieving these manufacturing goals? Because as more, I heard that same statistic yesterday and I was a bit shocked. I was a bit too scared to Google it. From a 20-odd% GDP down to 11% GDP. That's what manufacturing is doing right now. That is terrible. And we need to turn that around. But Ken, in your opinion, why are we not achieving that as corporates and larger companies? And why are we not achieving it as SMEs? What's the problem here? Where are we falling apart? Is it government's fault? Is it someone's fault? Can we blame someone, or is it our fault? Or what's the problem here?
Mark, that's a big ask in terms of a question. So let me try.
Okay, what are the solutions?
Yes. So let me try and I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, there's some areas. So let's start with I think Dr. Moore's premise. So if you look at what other countries have done, and he mentioned China, India. First of all, at a national policy level, you have a strategic goal to achieve something. So once you set that strategic goal to say you want to get somewhere, it has this, and you put some energy and resources behind it, has a way of focusing the mind. It's not dissimilar to President Kennedy saying the US will put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. It gets everybody's minds around that idea, and then resources, thinking, policies get. So there's some good examples of that right now in South Africa. In the last couple of years, the automotive sector, with DTI, have basically come up with this Master Plan 2035 that basically says double production from 600,000 vehicles to 1 billion, localize 35%, and transformation of tier 2 and below. So having these targets and then linking that to the automotive manufacturers, the big 7 OEMs, and saying your B scorecard or transformation will be tied to this, and continuation of the incentives is tied to that. It has a very good way of focusing the mind to say, now the folks at the top of the value chain, which are global manufacturers, now have to play into a framework. And having that sort of systematic approach has a way of mobilizing. So you'll find that the big 7 OEMs say, in order to keep the incentives that they have for exports, they have to work towards localization. They then start to work with tier 1 suppliers. Tier 1 suppliers have to work with tier 2 suppliers. It means you need to have skills development, which is where Merceta comes in. It means you have to have TVETs. So that starts to do training. That also then means the suppliers to the tier 1s and the OEMs need to have capital in order to be able to progress their businesses. So having that, it creates this ecosystem. So a good policy environment creates an ecosystem which basically brings together financing, skills development, and everything. In the absence of that, you have just the reverse problem. You have basically everything just kind of flying off the handle. So you look at other sectors, there's no really strategic thrust to say, we're going to do X. What is X? You know, and in the absence of that, there's no systematic, almost forced way for capital, for skills, for entrepreneurs to focus in that direction. I mean, if you look at, let's take the example of Uber, Bolt, etc., right? As a concept, they basically took, if you think about it, it's really no different than what, say, McDonald's and fast food have done. It's a franchise, and they've created a sub-franchisee. So the Bolt driver, the Uber driver, actually owns their own franchise, which is part of a bigger umbrella. They have to now go and get the financing to purchase their or rent their own automobile. That gets created. They have to get their own routes. That's provided by, you know, the app. But having those sorts of frameworks, and then capital starts to flow in the direction of, so where we don't have good policy and a policy enabling environment, and then sometimes I think increasingly maybe borrowing some good and not so good examples from other countries, is what's government's role? Is government to be the role of running the business? I mean, Sheldon does not, he does not get the government's permission to cut anyone's hair, right? People go and say, I need a haircut. If he has enough volume, eventually he'll have to grow. And the more customers he has in one area, the more shops he will set up. What government's role is to create an enabling environment for him to be able to set up as many shops and cut as many people's hair as he so desires or as they need. So government has to play the role of catalyst and not an obstacle. And this is a very important thing, is government is not there to do the business, not to go and cut hair for Sheldon's customers, thank God, but rather to enable him to serve his customers. So I think, so when we talk about the role of SOEs and so on and so forth, I mean, as we all sit today with this power thing, right? Government does not have the funding capability to support a utility. The utility doesn't necessarily have the access to capital either, but we all sit without power because there's a perception that the public has to depend on an entity to deliver something like that. That model is, so sometimes it's the role of government. So just to sort of unpack it, I'd say policy clarity, creating an enabling environment, government sometimes stepping in the way, creating an environment for capital to flow where it needs to go, because that will drive entrepreneurship, even in the current power environment. And we've seen this happen, you know, how many people buy airtime from spaza shops or whatever? Those are all entrepreneurs. And yet you still have only 3 companies delivering the telecom. So I think this idea of the role of government, policy development, policy framework, creating goals, creating an enabling environment is really critical, because then capital will flow to support those things. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That was capital flow is a very key point. And thank you so much for highlighting the macro picture. Now we're going to go down to the micro picture. Sheldon, I'm going to ask you some things. What I want to know from you is, what have been your challenges as a business during COVID? We can guess. Post-pandemic, what does your outlook look like? Is everybody rushing back to go get their hair done? But more importantly, what's the future of your business going forward? You're seeing a lot of expansion in that. And then if you had to ask government, or if you had to ask someone like Ken, who's working for a nice big in corporate industrial with lots of money, if you had to ask them to change something that would make your life much easier, what would be that one thing you would ask them? So what's your business look like? During COVID must have been tough. And then what's it looking like now going forward? And as a SME, not as a SME or properly established business with international footprint, what's the one thing you'd love to ask Ken? Please change this way, or please do this something different that would make your life much easier. Thanks, Sheldon.
No, thanks a lot for that question, Mark. I think for us personally, I echo what Mo was saying, because with the manufacturing part of the business, it's if you look at then China is one of the greatest examples that you can make out of. You understand, when when the former leader Mao Zedong stepped into power, and his whole ideology was looking at China 50 years from now and having a whole goal to say that everything will be made in China. You understand? And he started that ideology of made in China. I think for us personally, prices are increasing, you understand, and we are importing a number of goods from China. There is a lot of exports that's happening, and really it's becoming costly because now you can understand that container prices is skyrocketing. Containers even take longer to arrive, and I think that is one of the holdups in terms of our business, and basically the product creation. We are looking at local suppliers, but the problem is that price is a big factor. We have been sourcing around, not only in South Africa, even in different parts of Africa, and looking at which factories can actually produce our products that we'd like to create and at the same quality that China is giving us. And this is one of the challenges that we're currently facing, is having that local development being made in South Africa or in any other African country. I would definitely say that the government does play a big role in this. As you know, politics and business go hand in hand. Although us as business people don't want to look at it that way, but it really goes hand in hand because without politics, a country can't run, but without business, a country can't run. You understand? So it's one of those things where we have to come together on the table and see what do we do going forward, and how can we increase local production and have that whole value chain from production to consumption in one place. And I think that's really important for us, and that's one of the biggest challenges, especially looking post-COVID. I think that's really one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you for that insight, Sheldon. That's great to hear. Someone that we'd like. Okay, you own a string of barbershops, hairdressing and so on, but you have deep insight into where the issues are in the whole value chain and that's refreshing to hear. And I think it's important for our higher level leaders to understand that the people on the ground, just because they're selling Zimba chips or quarters or repairing exhaust by the side of the road, that they don't understand the importance of these value chains. And as you said, consumption to production to consumption. Everybody understands that. So thank you for that, Sheldon. Chris, from your side, what has been your insight into, from an engineering perspective, these big infrastructure projects and that? We do have an aging engineering contingent in that. Are our programs around artisanal development in that? Are we seeing success? Have you got any experience from a global perspective? What actually can work here in South Africa and Southern Africa to really push our numbers up from artisans to engineers and so on? What are your insights? Because we need you guys to manufacture the shampoo for Sheldon, and Sheldon needs Ken to get money from him to expand his factory, and Moore has to make sure that the guys are trained properly and that they're qualified to do what they do. But we need you, Chris, to give us insight as to what is actually needed and where the gaps are and the shortfalls are. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. And I think your ecosystem perspective of it is absolutely correct. There's absolute interdependency. And so if I were to just take, let's just say we have an aspiration to grow our economy. South Africa, unfortunately, we have a National Development Plan 2030, where the plan was to be spending up to about 30% of your gross fixed capital formation on as a percentage of GDP on infrastructure development. As we speak, it's come down from about, say, 18, it's down to about 13%. So we're going in the wrong direction to start off with. And what is required is two key ingredients, because unfortunately, the infrastructure is generally, you get two owners. It's a public asset owned by government. So you can't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go build a road. In fact, it gets more complex. You can't even fix a road without permission of government, where these are failing in many instances, unfortunately. And so that's the private sector, public sector assets. And then if you talk about that 30% component, at least quite a large portion of it, up to 25%, no less than that, is private sector investment. Now, that has also stagnated. The money is there from the private sector for that investment. In fact, we can shoot the lights out at the moment in a constrained fiscus that we find ourselves in. But we come back to the political certainty and the political will, policy certainty, sorry, policy certainty and political certainty to give investors, such as the entity that Ken represents, and even locally in South Africa, we've got the entities like ASISA and so on, where there's huge amounts of funds that could be invested in infrastructure. Now, so what? What if we build this infrastructure? It has got such a catalytic effect, not only within our own borders, but across our borders, where suddenly your logistics, your supply chains, Sheldon can get his hair products sooner. Any electronic equipment that he needs, you could probably get them faster. So you need that functional infrastructure. And then, what we see around us, for example, is in our water and sanitation schemes, there are entities and companies who rely absolutely on a reliable supply of good, clean water and sanitation systems for their businesses and for the industry. That's infrastructure. Now, the conundrum and the challenge is, as a private sector, the industry, contracting companies, contractors, your small artisan type of companies, electricians, plumbers, there are many who could benefit from getting this process going, because you're going to need all of those skills on board. The engineer sits in, does the design and so on, but you need the artisans, you need the hands. And certainly what we need, and I think to Moore's point, we probably need to encourage more people in South Africa and across the continent to pursue artisan type training. There's a huge shortage of that. And people, everybody, and I'm not saying that, look, there are horses for courses, and if your aspiration is that, by all means. But going into an academic environment is not necessarily a guarantee of getting a job. Whereas if you pursued an artisan type of training, plumbing, electricians, there's nothing denigrating about that. You are not a lesser individual. In fact, your earning power is potentially greater than many of these others who've gone to academic environments. Just ask any plumber on a long weekend when some wealthy family's got a blockage of their drains, they will pay you whatever you ask. And I think we're missing that because we've denigrated the role of the artisan in favor of academia. We need both, and we need them in equal measure. So there are huge opportunities. And I think those are even your fixed training beneficiaries. But often the unspoken about entrepreneurs is go around and just rewind, go to an era, say 2010, lots of construction activity in South Africa, and you look at the food stands. There's a lady there, she's got her food, and all the guys on the site, that's the canteen. There was no canteens. That's the cafeteria where people are going to go and eat. A budding business for a lady who has to feed, she can feed a family, put kids to school. Those are the opportunities that flow even at the most, simplest of levels, without the need for major investment and equipment and so on. And those grow into bigger businesses. But without the catalytic effect of a booming industry such as construction, which has the potential to create a huge amount of jobs in the short term, the longer term, obviously, the benefits go without saying in terms of the macroeconomic growth objectives of a country. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks once again, Chris, for, that's great insight. I mean, I think our youth really are missing out on the opportunities of going into artisanal fields. We hear all the stories. I hope they're not legendary, but artisans earning more than engineers and mines in Australia, and that because even engineers going to study another discipline just to be qualified as an artisan to go underground because they earn more that way. So yeah, I think we really need to drive that. So that's Moore's job. Moore, you got to make artisanals more sexy. So I don't know how you're going to do that. Where do we start with that? Is that another key favorite subject of mine is the role of technology in everything. If we had to bring more tech into artisanal training, would that make it more sexy? I mean, all our youngsters are used to mobile phones and WhatsApping and all that, and not spanners and pliers and blowdraad, as we call it in Afrikaans, that blue wire. I don't know what it is in English, the wire for your fencing. How do we make it more sexy for them? I mean, what role is technology? Are you seeing a change in technology? People are asking about it. Another question is, how quickly are your training curriculum, are they shifting towards technology as well? I mean, I think that's very slow, or is it very fast? I don't know. You have to tell us. What's the role of technology in your sector, and how do we make it more sexy so that Chris doesn't have sleepless nights?
Yes. No, thank you so much, Mark, and to Chris, who obviously brought up the issue of artisans. I think the modern day artisan is definitely sexy. I think it's the issue of exposure. Unfortunately, there's still the old perceptions of artisans as a dirty job, or wearing the blue overalls, the greases and the like. But where we see artisan, development, it has really transitioned, together with obviously developments in terms of technology and innovation. If you can, I think Ken earlier on mentioned the role of the automotive sector. I'll give the OEM sector, for example. We have quite a number of OEM, manufacturing companies in South Africa. You can just go to one of them. You'll see how impressive the technology is there. You walk into a BMW plant in Roslyn, or Mercedes-Benz in East London, or VW plant in the Eastern Cape. It's high-tech, technology, robotics, and the modern day artisan is not really always about the spanners. And now we're talking about electric cars. It means that even the kind of skills that as South Africa or as Africa that we might need to develop, it's really the tech savvy kind of artisan who understands technology, who is very innovative, and his view of the world is really different from the way the artisan of maybe 30 years ago was. So I think that is going to be fundamental when it comes to training, education, going forward. And I think that's where perhaps there's a disjuncture, particularly in Africa. I think earlier on we did mention the role that, even TVET colleges, the government has to play. We still seem to be lagging on that, because if you look at industries has progressed quite, well in terms of embracing technology, and hence, embracing any advances that have come through in terms of the innovation that is happening in the sector. But I think they still seem to be a lag, particularly from the education and training side of things, where there is always that disjuncture to say, the artisan, for example, that is coming out from a TVET college, do they have the right skill? And my question is, who's responsible for that artisan to have the right skill? Is it just the responsibility of the TVET college? No. Industry also has a critical role to play. Government from a policy side of things and other enabling mechanisms are quite key. And we see the success of the artisan story from the likes of Switzerland, from the likes of Germany. It's because the model of artisan development is developed in such a manner that there is that synergy. It's the ecosystem. I think Ken did mention the ecosystem approach, be it to training, be it to funding, or be it to supporting some of our entrepreneurs. Where in Africa or in South Africa, yes, we are there as sitters, we're working with industry, TVET colleges, but I think we need to strengthen those synergies. And hence you might have come across in some instances where you hear comments from industry saying the artisan that is coming out from TVET college is not the right quality. What does it mean? Where did we get it wrong? Because the understanding is that training is not just the responsibility of the TVET college, particularly when it comes to practical skills such as artisan development. So I think this is where, as South Africa or in Africa in general, we sort of like have to learn from other developed countries as well as other developing nations like China and India that have really embraced that need to work together, be it between government, their industry, Mercedes-Benz, Mercedes-Benz in Germany, the way they do their training, their centers of excellence, where they are working with even local community colleges, local, universities, local TVET colleges, so that artisan that comes out from that TVET college, they can easily be absorbed into Mercedes-Benz. So I think this is really one area that we need to strengthen. And I think the perceptions as well. We really need to change people's perceptions around artisans. It is true that some of the artisans are really earning more than people that underwent university education. It's unfortunate that particularly people in our communities, and when I'm saying communities, I mean where the majority of people live in the communities, it's because of that lack of exposure. It's that lack of access, to information. And as a result, the perceptions that they have is that perception of an artisan that is always, doing the dirty job, and probably they are not even earning much. So if we change those perceptions, especially among some of the young people that are even before they even get to the post-school education and training system, so that when they make those choices, they are making informed choices about their careers. Artisan development, even the barbers, we have a good example here. We have Sheldon. Those are artisan kind of skills, the skills that require, practical skills to be applied. And what that does, it also comes with an entrepreneurship opportunity. From just being an artisan, instead of in most academic jobs, where the impression is that you get employed at a bank or you get employed at an insurance company, at an IT company. There is really opportunities in artisan kind of jobs, because if you look at even most people that have created jobs, it's artisans. Look at your mechanics, look at Kenny here, because doing your hair, be it as a barber or as a hairstylist, that is an artisan kind of skill, not just on the technical side of things in terms of manufacturing, even on the softer side of things. Those are the kind of skills that can even help in creating jobs as well as entrepreneurship opportunities. And I think that understanding, unfortunately, is often not there, especially in our communities. And if we can have, especially people like Ken, I know he's doing quite a lot. If we can also have success stories like Ken, going into communities, seeing what some of what they are doing, the changes that it has made, the difference that it has made, not just to them as individuals, but to the community as well. It becomes a tangible story to say, well, I thought maybe I have limited opportunities. You know, young people at times, they're young people that don't make it to universities, and they think that that's the end of life, because now they can't get that academic qualification without knowing that there are other opportunities elsewhere. And fortunately in South Africa, the opportunities are there for training, you know, for funding, but because people don't have access to that kind of information. And I think that's where we really need to work together, be it from the government side of things, entrepreneurs as well that have made it, as well as other role players. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mo. That was a really nice summation of getting artisans, yeah, just getting people involved, coming for training, get it, you know, go and choose a direction that there's opportunity for you, that there's a market out. And I wanted to ask Sheldon, and I wanted to ask you as well, Mo and Chris. Sheldon, you first. If you had to choose a different career, totally different career, what would you have? Would you have become a plumber or an electrician or a motor mechanic or a computer scientist? What would you have done differently? Differently.
I think I always wanted to be a pilot though. I just
pilot,
had this vision of becoming a pilot. Yeah, so I think that was one thing that
what happened? What happened? Why didn't you become a pilot?
Yeah, I just think barbering just took, of course, I mean, like the passion for barbering just took the course of me. Yeah, I think, yeah, it was either I become a pilot or I become a doctor. I was basically stuck in between the two. And yeah, I think growing up, exactly what Mo was echoing, it's basically the stereotype that everyone needs to have a degree to succeed. You understand? Yeah. and I think the reverse has actually happened over a couple of years, and you see like people without degrees being able to do phenomenal work, and especially in the entrepreneurship space as well. You definitely see it happen.
Yeah, no, I've seen it as well. Chris, if you had to do something totally different, what would you have done?
Well, Mark, that's a tricky question. I'll tell you why. So it was never my intention to be a civil engineer to start off with.
Okay.
I am the first generation engineer in my family, and in many respects, chicken's teeth in this country. So, you know, my aspiration initially was to, you know, go into, I thought, hell, maybe I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer and an engineer all at the same time. But of course, reality doesn't allow that to happen. And, but I certainly would have gone down the path of mechanical engineering. I have found, for instance, in civil engineering, there's a lot more compassion, the desire to serve people and work with infrastructure that serves the benefits of society. So maybe that's a part of me that happened by accident. I'm guessing that had I gone down the path of being a mechanical engineer, I would have focused strongly on some of my hobbies, which I have anyway. I mean, you know, I've fixed my own cars, I can do my own plumbing, I can change several light bulbs, you know, so, you know, I can do a lot of DIY stuff. And that for me is, I even do a bit of woodwork for the fun of it because I enjoy it. It's therapeutic, you know, so yeah, very difficult to say whether I would necessarily totally change all of it because, you know, life is like that. You may get to a crossroad or a fork, and you've got to choose the left one and the right one. And you've got to having made that choice, you should never be looking back with regrets. You've got to make the best of the path that you had set out on. And I think to the point that we've raised earlier on, many young people and many people generally, you know, unemployment is a massive issue in South Africa. We should be getting to the point where people understand and we have more information available to them that it's actually a quicker entry point to securing a job if you went down the artisan route, because you can go and work for yourself almost immediately, or you can go and work for a smaller company that's doing these kinds of electrical repairs, mechanical. And I just wanted to make one interesting point, that South Africa is a bit of a dichotomy in terms of where people are at and what would be workable in a TVET. In the automotive sector, and where you've got everything roboticized, it's great, you can have gadgets. But we still have a huge education gap, which we need to fulfill in the construction environment. So 4IR, 3D printing of houses, what's going to happen to those people? We need to retrain them, upskill the people so they can operate that equipment, know how those things work and operate them using these devices. So yeah, I just thought if I could take the opportunity to just come back to that, rather than that bad reflection on looking, what should I have done something else? No, I choose not to do that. Thanks, Mark.
That's a absolutely crucial point, that those of us that have done the hard yards, I mean, Sheldon must have some awesome stories, warnings to tell people, don't do this, do this. Yourself, Chris, you've just alluded to that. Don't regret what you've done, your life path, and that. Look back at it as a learning experience. So I think there's a lot to be said for mentoring and being a mentor. And I think more you've seen that you have to, the role of mentors. And there are so many people out there willing to mentor for nothing. You don't have to consult. I was going to ask you more, what would you like to have done? But I'm going to ask Ken. Ken, if you had to go somewhere totally different, what would you have done?
Very, very good question. So, I mean, I started off a bit like Chris as a civil engineer, then I migrated into environmental engineer. I had a career in engineering, and then I discovered that all the decisions were made by people in the business side. I mean, I worked for utility, and I found that we were powerless. We couldn't say what we wanted to do. They told us what they were going to do. I worked in manufacturing at Hewlett Packard. They said, well, this is what we're making next. And I discovered that actually people in finance were the ones who were making the decisions. So, but now as I look back, I mean, just sort of, and I just kind of reflecting on, as you look around the world and standards of living and quality of life and large numbers of people, it's really the technicians that are, we see on the continent of Africa, we import people from the Philippines to work on oil and gas refineries. We import people from China to come and supervise road construction. In Germany, it's not the engineers who design the cars, it's the technicians who manufacture the cars. The same thing in Japan. So if I had to personally choose what I would call a high income unionized job, I would probably pick something working on if I had the competence, the skills working on an oil refinery. I once sat on a plane next to a guy who had been flown from the Philippines to just come and put in something on an oil refinery somewhere in Cameroon. And I thought, wow, what a life! He gets paid lots of money. He flies there and he puts it on and he's off. And he's probably on holiday. Same thing with folks who work on the oil rigs for Schlumberger. They're on 6 weeks and then they're off for 3 months. So I think this whole, I mean, not to minimize or trivialize it, but the technicians, the artisans, you have volume. The volume, the more families around the world that can live off of a technician's income than they are on an engineer's income. I mean, no disrespect to Chris or Dr. Moore, but there'll be a lot more of them, and therefore they would actually feed more mouths and support a bigger tax system. So I think that aspect of the role of artisans, if you think about sort of a pyramid structure, which a lot of societies we cannot really afford, as opposed to almost more like a diamond, where you have a lot more people in the middle who can really contribute to the society at large, in terms of income, skills. And then they also have sort of the benefit of lifetime learning. So if you talk to the folks who are in manufacturing, on a manufacturing line, and this has been seen over the years, So what do the union workers at GM and so on fight for? They want the lifetime employment and skills development so they can keep working. because otherwise they'll be obsolete. If every 7 years the car changes and you're just a design engineer, you might be gone. Or if now it requires more automation, more IT, and you don't have that. So I would definitely opt for something more in kind of that artisan, bracket, because it would actually create more sustained income. And I think would have more spillover benefits, more training opportunities. And I want to link that to something we talked about, sort of funding, right? So very often, I want to use the Uber and Bolt example. They are artisans. They have their own SMME. They have one vehicle, or they go and look for a fleet of vehicles. Or Sheldon, he has to have a license in order for him to be able to have a shop, right? Or a cosmetologist or a beauty technician. But they can open more shops and employ more people over time. And with that, their need for capital grows. And as they're able to show their cash flows in their business, they're actually able to generate more capital. So I think this notion that only the big entities are the only ones that actually should be able to attract capital is something we need to probably rethink. What is probably missing is helping the entrepreneurs and the SMMEs think about what are the providers of capital looking for when they come for capital. So if Sheldon is looking to expand to 1,000 shops across South Africa, if you look at what Supercuts has done or whatever, that's a big franchise. You can multiply that. You can show the cash flows, and that becomes something that makes a compelling proposition for a provider of capital. So I think this thing of skills, capital, very, very much intertwined, very, very much intertwined.
Thank you for that, Ken. Yeah, that's good food for thought there. So it seems like everybody wanted to be artisans. More coming back to you now. So I'm going to ask you, what did you want to become? But then also tie that in with, we've got a shortage. Chris knows we've got a shortage. He's highlighted that because all of you that wanted to be artisans went and became barbers and financiers and civil engineers. We've got a shortage. Now, what happens when there's a shortage of a skill is we automate it. Or we either import it, but if there's not enough, we then find a way around that. So we automate it, we bring in technology. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing any sort of trends in certain industries where there's going to be more and more and more automation, which brings with it more complexity? And because there's more complexity, Chris and his team have to build more infrastructure for us. Where do you see this complexity and what sort of industry verticals? You're not allowed to say automotive. I want to talk about the other industries because South Africa, we point to automotive a bit too much. We need to look at the other industries. So pretend we didn't have an automotive sector. Complexities, what would you prefer to have become or would have loved to have become? And then let's talk about the gap, the widening gap of not enough people and bringing in technology and so on. And what types of technology, if you can talk to that as well. Thanks.
No, thank you so much. Let me start with the second question. Technology has certainly taken over, not just the manufacturing sector, but across all sectors. So we are seeing a trend, not just globally or in developed countries, but it's also coming, especially to countries in Africa as well, particularly in South Africa, because South Africa is always the leader when it comes to some of these trends. And what that does is that it brings with it complexities in terms of not just the business models, but also in terms of the kind of capabilities and the skills that are required in those kind of businesses. So meaning that there is always this debate to say, which is why in some instances, unions don't always like it when there's a lot of automation, because there's always that belief that people lose jobs. But the reality of the matter is that there's quite a lot of new jobs that have been created due to the introduction of new processes, new technologies and the like. And I think where we often fail is that we wait for these developments and these changes and the innovations and the technologies to come without, really responding, to say, as a sector, be it a textile sector, be it a food and beverages sector, be it a financial services sector, how do we best proactively respond? The technology is here. it's in our midst, even in terms of the skills and the capability, in terms of the people that we have, instead of having a situation whereby we have to lay off people because they don't have the right skill. Because the reality of the matter in South Africa is that we have a lot of semi-skilled as well as unskilled, labor, which is why there's always this debate to say, how come we're saying there's a lot of scarce skills? We end up importing skills from other countries, whilst on the other hand, unemployment is increasing. The challenge is that where the world is going, unskilled labor as well as some of the semi-skilled labor, because of the introduction of technology, that is slowly being phased away. So it means that as companies, as government, us from the sector, education and training authorities, we need to ensure that people are trained, people are reskilled. It's reskilling, transskilling, multi-skilling, so that when there are changes, be it in the production environment, people can easily move, and take up other opportunities that are created as a result of some of these advances, innovations, and introduction of technology, so that we don't have a situation where people always complain that, there are people that come from outside the country, to take up jobs. It's because those are jobs that require skilled people. And if those skills cannot be found here, unfortunately, it forces business to import the skills, because at the end of the day, they have to create value as business for their shareholders, as well as for the general stakeholders, who also include society. So that will be how I respond to the issue of the complexities that have been brought. Policy alone is not adequate. Policy without action is not adequate. I think Ken did mention earlier on to say, yes, we have policies. I think in South Africa, I think even other countries have moved on to come up with policies and strategies to respond to the fourth industrial revolution. But unfortunately, the train is moving. It's not going to wait for policies, translations that are just sitting elsewhere without really being implemented. And before we know it, unemployment will increase. New opportunities will be created, but unfortunately, the local people will not benefit. So I think this is something that we really need to think carefully in terms of strategies that really take people along. When we develop these strategies, it's always about the people. It's always about the society. It's always about the communities that obviously businesses, serve. And obviously, government has a fundamental role to play in that, in terms of driving some of those agendas. Then in terms of what I would have wanted to be, growing up, there are different phases that I went through in life. At one stage, I was more interested, obviously being a young man, I was more interested in the kind of, science fiction kind of things. Growing up, watching the likes of, Knight Rider at that point in time, it was, Michael Knight. So I had this fascination of cars, So it sort of like triggered this idea to say, what, maybe I could be one of these. At that point in time, obviously, I saw them as scientists, that can develop, some of these amazing technologies that can really do amazing things. Because when you are young, fortunately, the way you dream, the way you think, there's no limitations. The sky is not even the limit. So I had these wild imaginations in terms of, some of the amazing stuff that one can do if they had the kind of the scientific skills and the like. And obviously, as time went on, I transitioned into a period where I was really more into the human side of things, where for me, it was about the people. I don't know, it's either because I watched a lot of movies, so as a result, I wanted to be a behavioral scientist, whatever that is. I remember this very well. From a very young age, I wanted to be a behavioral scientist because it always fascinated me in terms of understanding people's behaviors and how you can then model that in terms of ensuring that maybe as society, or as the world, we progress. So that's the kind of transition up until now, where I found myself obviously following the academic route, where I studied obviously, information systems, IT, up to a PhD level. Then yeah, that's where I am at this point in time. But I'm still fascinated, like Chris said, I think with us who follow the academic route, it really fascinates you when you see the artisans in terms of the practical things that they can do. They build things, they make stuff. So as an academic, you might have all this academic knowledge, but at the end of the day, you still have the respect, for people that using their hands, using their creativity and their abilities, to build stuff, and not just to build stuff for fun, but to build stuff that makes life easy. Look at everything around you. If it wasn't there, life would be so difficult. And this is where really I also got to appreciate people that use their own hands to earn a living, as well as make the world a better place. Thank you.
That was an awesome way to end off. So dear panelists, we're going to start wrapping up now. But I'd just like to make a quick summary of what we've spoken about. I mean, we've had a really awesome response, and I thank you so much for all of your engagement. And you've given us a different picture. I mean, when I looked at your bios, I had like a mindset. This is the box I'm going to put you in. This is the box I'm going to put you in. And you've totally blown those boxes. And I hope for our audience as well, you've blown their minds a bit. We'll never look at bankers or hairstylists or teachers and trainers and civil engineers and so on. We'll never look at them the same again. We've got to find out from them, who are they really as people. So thank you so much for just expanding our minds, talking a little bit around those deeper issues that we have as society, and being positive. I mean, these are the things that can be done to make a change. And I think giving great inputs as to what direction should we be focusing on now. This whole thing of artisans came up really strongly in the talk today, that we need more people that can work with their hands. We need those brains that really want to make a different world that we can all really enjoy living in. So I thank you so much for those inputs. And then to close off, I really don't want to close off. It's been such a great time chatting to all of you, and I think there's a lot more that we can unpack. But 20 seconds, each one of you got 20 seconds. One thing that you see, this keeps you awake at night. This is a big challenge for, let's say Africa. Let's not say South Africa. Africa, big challenge for Africa. And then also something that makes you so super positive about Africa, you wouldn't even think of immigrating to Australia. So we'll start with you, Ken. Something that keeps you awake at night in Africa, like, oh, geez, we need to get this right. And then something that's really, really awesome about Africa, and it can be anything, the food, the weather, the people, whatever, that you'll never immigrate just because of that. Thanks, Ken. You go first.
So thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of you. I mean, so as an African, I've come back to work on the continent because I see just tremendous opportunity. Africa is really where all the minerals of tomorrow, I mean, that are being needed for technology, they're here. What keeps me up at night is the fact that we need to quickly exploit that opportunity before somebody else comes and does it for us, And then in terms of another big thing that is a really huge issue is that to get businesses to understand how capital works and how to access capital, to move away from this sense of I'm entitled to capital because I'm in business, but really, a friend of mine in Zimbabwe years ago said, money is looking for a good home. So as you look for money, why is your business worthy of a good home without money? How do you package your business need in a way that the funders will be happy to provide the fund? So really to spend energy on that issue, I think is huge. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Awesome. Chris, from your side, something that keeps you awake at night, a challenge in Africa it's a big challenge, and then something that says, I'm not going to go to Australia because only in Africa, this is what I love about it. Tell us.
Yeah, thank you. I think what keeps me awake at night is the real unfortunate squandering of this great opportunity to have such a great continent with, I think the people across the continent, and I have the fortune of having lived in the US sometime and being the president of African Student Society at my university there, where I got to meet people from all over the continent. And I mean, just the most wonderful of people sitting here in South Africa, and having that opportunity, and you know, I think we're squandering it. So that's something that keeps us awake at night, or keeps me awake at night. And you know, certainly, almost automatically, that's exactly the same thing that won't make me go and live elsewhere. I have lived there for a little while. I've lived in the US, and you know, you get to feel very unwelcome, and that happens elsewhere. You know, so certainly wouldn't necessarily want to change my environment, but stay here to keep putting up the good fight.
Thanks, Chris. That's a nice ending there. Keep putting up the good fight there. Moore, Dr. Moore, what do you say?
Yes, for me, what keeps me awake is really the lack of that sense of agency. We really move quite slow. You know, we have these brilliant ideas, policies, you know, and the like, but I think we really move slow, which is why we are always playing catch up, you know, to the rest of the world. Once we get that right, I think, you know, Africa will be up there with the rest of the world. Then, yeah, in terms of what will make me really stay in Africa, it's the people. The people in Africa are amazing. You know, they are loving. In our diversity, you know, we still love each other, which I believe is not something that one gets to experience, you know, anywhere in the world. There's someone that has, you know, traveled quite a lot. I never feel the same love as the same love that I feel, you know, when I'm in Africa. Thank you.
That's very true. I think it's only here that we speak to the people at the petrol attendants, and we like one of the few places that actually have petrol attendants, the lady that packs your bags in the supermarket. We have big fat conversations with everybody, anybody. So yeah, no, that's very, very true. It's yeah, that brotherly, sisterly feeling here. Sheldon, we're going to end off with you because you're the entrepreneur here. Yeah, we really loved your story, and you know, you've gone through the hard yards. So you know, what keeps you awake at night? And you're not allowed to say your business. SARS. You can't say SARS.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. Yeah. Can we assume it's cash flow, or is there something else that keeps you awake at night? And then what will you're allowed to open a barbershop franchise in Australia, but you yourself, you're not allowed to go there. So what will keep you here? Thanks, Sheldon.
Yeah, I think what keeps me awake at night is just looking at the different opportunities that there is in Africa. I mean, I've traveled to the east and the west, and also living in the south. so the opportunities is quite vast. I think you don't realize the opportunities you have until you travel to the different places. And I think for me personally, there's no other place that I would rather be, is to be in Africa. I don't think our business would be as fast growing, as basically profitable as it is in Africa, because I think it's a purely based African business, and we look to scale it up across Africa. Yeah, I think that's why, and that's just what keeps me awake at night, is basically just looking how we can grow this business across the continent. And yeah, I think it's Africa's #1 barber. And yeah, the positivity. I mean, the positivity, there's so much. You know, if you look at each and every different country has something special about it. I was in Ghana last year, and basically just noticing how many female entrepreneurs there are. I'm just amazed to see that there are so many female entrepreneurs. For me, it was mind-blowing, you understand? Especially coming from South Africa, where entrepreneurs are dominated by male, and going on to Ghana, and you see like, it's actually a culture difference, it's a culture switch. And these are the positives that I look into. These are the positives that I can definitely take out of, because I actually get inspiration from these guys on the street that's busy hustling, that's busy selling, that's busy doing all of those things just to make a living. So those are definitely the positives that I can take out of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad we didn't mention ESCOM once. So we're a very positive bunch of people, and I think it's as your T-shirt says, guys, let's go out there and be legendary. Let's not hold back. The more challenges that Africa throws at us, the world throws at us, let's overcome those challenges. Let's overcome those obstacles, and let's mentor, guys. Let's take what's between our ears, our hard-earned experience. Let's pass that down. Let's pass it on forward. And I think let's be the ones that make the difference. And that includes the audience that will be listening to this as well. Let's go out there and be the difference, be the change that you want to see. That's how I like to see it. So thanks so much, very, very much. A huge thank you to the panelists. You guys have been so candid and open, and I haven't had to draw teeth. You've just been, there's just so much to share. And I think, we could do with another whole full day just with you guys. So thank you so much. And then, thank you to Infrastructure Africa for setting this up. And we look forward to the rest of the event. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.